Good morning and welcome to the New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Women and Gender Equity, jointly with Technology. At this time, can everybody please silence your cell phones? If you wish to testify, please go up to the Sergeant at Arms desk to fill out a testimony slip. At this time and going forward, no one is to approach the dais. I repeat, no one is to approach the dais. Thank you for your cooperation. Chairs, we are ready to begin.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Tiffany Caban. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the chair of the Committee on Women and Gender Equity. I'd like to begin by thanking my colleague, Chair Jennifer Gutierrez, of the Committee on Technology for holding this important hearing with me today. Today's oversight hearing is about online harassment against women, girls, and gender-expansive people. Since the creation of the internet, online usage across the globe has become more and more mainstream, and in recent years, online life has become a fundamental aspect of everyday life, with connectivity being rooted in online spaces. Although the internet has aided people all over the world in connecting to others as well as accessing vital resources, it has also become an increasingly used medium for amplification of discrimination and violence. According to Pew Research Center, as of 2021, over 41% of adults in the United States have experienced some form of online harassment, including physical threats, stalking, sustained harassment, sexual harassment, offensive name-calling, and purposeful embarrassment. Over 46% of teens in the US have reported experiencing forms of cyberbullying, including name-calling, spreading of false rumors, receiving explicit images that weren't solicited, or having their explicit images shared without their consent, or physical threats, and overwhelmingly, social media is cited as the most common venue for harassment, with over 75% of targets of online abuse stating that their experience took place over social media. Online harassment affects all demographics, but not all equally. Women, girls, femmes, queer, and gender-expansive people are subjected to a disproportionate amount of online harassment, and the harassment they receive is disproportionately sexual in nature. For example, 3 times as many women under 35 as men under 35 have reported facing sexual harassment online. Beyond the statistics, today's hearing is very personal to me. As a public figure, a proud queer Latina, an abolitionist, democratic socialist, I have gotten more than my fair share of rape and death threats and queer-phobic hatred from anonymous individuals online. Last year, when the New York Post published 7 lie-ridden hit pieces against me in 1 week, the resulting wave of racist, sexist, violent, threatening voicemails and emails was so bad that the City Council Security Office advised us to close our district office for weeks on end and forward all of our voicemails straight to them. Here's just one example of many unacceptable emails my staff received. Dear Lesbo cunt, here's what me and millions of New Yorkers would cheer for. That one day soon you're surrounded by a gang of subway N-words who rape and beat you to death, then throws your rotting Lesbo carcass in front of a train. Good riddance to one more freak. As revolting as this sort of thing is, it is even more disturbing that media figures, leading politicians, and other powerful individuals see whipping up this kind of hatred as the key to their own wealth, fame, and ambition. At today's hearing, the committees look forward to hearing from NGBV about the ways in which the office has addressed gendered online harassment in its work and the support service structures in the city to survivors of this violence. The committees also look forward to hearing from advocates and survivors about the prevalence of online harassment and recommendations for how the council can address such harms. I would like to thank members of the administration from NGBV and CGE, although I know CGE was unfortunately unable to make it today, along with other interested stakeholders and members of the public, including advocates and any individuals with lived experience who have taken the time to join us. We look forward to hearing from you. Finally, I would like to thank my own staff, Chief of Staff Celia Castellan, Legislative Director Madhuri Shukla, Communications Director Jesse Meyerson, as well as our committee staff, Committee Counsel Sahar Mozami, and Senior Legislative Policy Analyst Christy Dwyer for their work on this hearing. And now I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Chair Gutierrez, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Chair Caban. And before I start, I just want to commend you and your entire staff for having to receive all of that and still continuing to serve your community and continuing to center community safety around everything that you do. I think you're doing an incredible job, and I'm so sorry about all that. I'm Chair Gutierrez, Chair of the Committee on Technology. I'm pleased to join my colleague, Councilmember Cavan, for this important hearing on online harassment against women, girls, and gender-expansive people. In the digital age, online connectivity has created unprecedented opportunities for communication and collaboration. However, it is deeply troubling to witness the simultaneous eruption of online hate and harassment, a pervasive issue that transcends virtual boundaries. The impact of such behavior extends far beyond the digital team, affecting individuals on a personal and professional level, and in many cases, resulting in real-world violence and harm. Many forms of social interactions are shifting to the digital world through social media, online gambling, and virtual reality. Cyberbullying, cyberstalking, trolling, doxing, revenge porn, and AI-generated deepfakes are but some of the increasingly common forms of online harassment. The rise of smart homes and metaverses also carry new risks stemming from online connectivity. As technology evolves, we are confronted with new and complex issues in forms of harassment, and as a society, we are lagging behind on addressing these harms. Anyone can become a victim of online harassment, from high school students to small businesses to elected officials. Research shows that women are often the most frequent targets of online harassment, with members of the LGBTQ+ community also reportedly far more likely to face online harassment. With the new reality of significant online connectivity and future promises of increasing technological sophistication, we need to be even more prepared to protect against online harassment. Today, we're eager to learn from the administration about the measures and initiatives they're employing to combat online harassment, as well as the resources available to support victims. The committees are also looking forward to hearing testimony from the public to better understand the present challenges and future implications around online harassment, as well as what we, as the council, can do to mitigate and prevent those harms from occurring. We have a responsibility to promote digital ethics and responsible online behavior, to collectively create an environment in which diverse voices are heard, ideas are exchanged, and meaningful dialogue flourishes. I want to express my sincere gratitude once again to Chair Cavan for uplifting this important issue through this hearing and including the Technology Committee. Thank you to Committee Counsel Irene Bayovsky, Policy Analyst Charles Kim, and my staff Anya Lair and Anna Bessendorf for their effort in putting this hearing together. I'd also like to recognize Technology Committee members. I see Council members Riley and Holden, and Council Member Brewer is here as well. And I can now turn it over to Committee Counsel.
Thank you, chairs. Good morning. As a reminder, today is an in-person hearing with the option of virtual testimony for the public. The committee will be accepting registrations for testimony throughout the hearing. For those wishing to testify in person, please see the Sergeant-at-Arms in the back of the hearing room to fill out a testimony card, even if you're registered in advance online. For those testifying via Zoom, your name will be called and you will be prompted to unmute. All those who wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. We will now hear testimony from members of the administration. Will you please raise your right hand? Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do. I do.
Thank you. You may begin when ready.
Great. Good morning, Chair Caban, Chair Gutierrez, members of the Committee on Women and Gender Equity, and members of the Committee on Technology. I'm Saloni Sethi, First Deputy Commissioner of the Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, or NGBV, and I'm joined by Jennifer DeCarli, NGBV's Deputy Commissioner for Family Justice Centers and Survivors Supports. NGBV operates the city's 5 family justice centers and directly manages a contract portfolio of prevention and intervention programming. Our office builds capacity for agency staff and community members to identify and respond to domestic and gender-based violence through outreach and training, and we develop policies and best practices to strengthen the city's approaches to these issues. We collaborate with city agencies, over 100 nonprofit providers, community stakeholders, and people with lived experience to reduce barriers and ensure access to inclusive services for survivors of DV and GBV. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about online harassment against women, girls, and gender-expansive people. Online harassment is a troubling form of gender-based violence that can include threats to personal safety, stalking, doxing, cyber exploitation, deepfakes, and non-consensual distribution of intimate images. Online harassment can be perpetrated by strangers, friends, family, or intimate partners. As our world has shifted to more online engagement, we have seen technology increasingly used as a tool to facilitate and perpetuate harmful and abusive behavior. Research studies indicate that women and gender-expansive individuals are more likely to be targeted online and more likely to experience more severe forms of online harassment than cisgender men. A Plan International survey of over 14,000 young women and girls found that 58% of respondents have experienced online harassment, including abusive language and cyberbullying. Research by the Webb Foundation and the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts found that 84% of young women think the problem of online abuse is getting worse. For LGBTQ+ youth, Black youth, and young women of color worldwide, the impact of gender-based harassment is compounded when they also experience harassment based on the other marginalized identities they hold. Online harassment can create significant obstacles for girls, women, and gender-expansive individuals who use online spaces for education, employment, entertainment, and community and civic engagement. The fear of harassment may lead individuals to limit or avoid digital spaces altogether, which can negatively impact their educational, professional, and social opportunities, and deter them from public life that occurs online. Online harassment can also affect individuals' mental health and overall well-being. Continuous threats, humiliation, and invasion of privacy online can result in anxiety, depression, and other psychological distress. Many of the prevention and intervention tools we have for gender-based violence more broadly can be adapted to address online harassment. For example, early intervention programs like the city's ABCs of Healthy Relationships for elementary age students and early relationship abuse prevention program for middle school age students teach young people about positive and consent-driven interpersonal relationships, conflict resolution, and gender equity. The middle school programming in particular includes conversations about how harmful gender dynamics play out online. Our Family Justice Centers partner with community-based organizations that have a wealth of experience in addressing gender-based violence, including online harassment. Our partners offer training on technology safety and can assist individuals to safety plan around technology, identify spyware and other harmful tools that compromise digital safety, and explore civil and criminal remedies that may be available to address online harassment if the survivor wishes to pursue such legal options. These remedies include relief under New York City and New York State law, which include the disclosure or threat to disclose intimate images as civil and criminal offenses. Under New York State law, judges can order offenders and websites that host or disseminate non-consensual intimate images to remove the offensive content. When online harassment or non-consensual intimate image disclosure is committed by an intimate partner or family member, survivors can file for orders of protection in New York State Family Court and/or file a police report. Survivors of non-consensual intimate image disclosure may also be eligible for victim compensation from the state. NGBV and our partners have supported the implementation of these laws with training and service coordination. We look forward to continued collaboration with the Council, our sister city agencies, and our community-based partners to support a safe online environment. Thank you for the opportunity to appear here today. We welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. When you find it, just let me know. Okay, I'd like to just start with asking some questions around programming. I know that you talked very broadly about some of the services are available and that they apply or are relevant for folks who are experiencing online gender-based harassment. So research shows that 41% of adults and 46% of teens in the US have experienced some form of online harassment. And women and gender-expansive folks often report that they're specifically targeted for online harassment due to their gender and other intersecting identities. And research shows that they're more likely to face more severe forms of online harassment, as was mentioned by you in your testimony. Can you tell us what your office is doing to work with New York City residents to address this distressing form of violence? And more specifically, does the office have any specific programming around online harassment and the gendered impacts of such harassment? And I have other questions, but I'm talking about something that isn't just, oh, this covers it, it applies to this, but is there concentrated, specific programming that's available?
Sure. So I can address that through some of the kind of broad strokes that Saloni touched on in our testimony. So at our family justice centers, if you come into the centers and you're talking about online harassment, we of course do safety planning as we do with every survivor who comes in, and we do training of our advocates to understand what technology abuse looks like and to actually be able to safety plan around that, right? So how do you know if you're sharing locations on your Google phones with folks, right? Those kind of really specific safety planning questions. We explore whether or not someone wants to file a police report. Many survivors do not want to explore that. So we also explore things like orders of protection in family court. The kind of penalties and legal remedies out there are harassment and stalking and aggravated harassment. The laws specifically directed at revenge porn that are newer laws. So we explore whether or not they want to kind of file orders of protection or police reports about that. And then we do have a unique partnership with Cornell Tech. We're really grateful to have that partnership. We've had it for a number of years where they have volunteer students who are experts in technology who do digital privacy safety checkups with clients who want to sit with somebody, and we do most of them remotely post-COVID, but they do have the ability to offer in-person appointments for high-risk cases where they actually talk to somebody about what their phone looks like, how to protect themselves from sharing accounts, as I said, and really just give them that kind of overall digital privacy kind of overview as to how to protect their phones and themselves online. And then, like I said, they can come in person and actually scan someone's phone if it's a high-risk case. So we've been really lucky to have that partnership, and they also do regular ongoing training on what we call Tech Safety Abuse 101, where they really make sure the advocates, because just being honest, this is not, I'm not an expert in technology, right? So we need someone to come in who is an expert in technology, who can really sit and work with our advocates to be able to work with survivors around this issue.
Thank you. I want to follow up on that. The Cornell Tech partnership, is that only available if somebody goes through the Family Justice Center? Can folks access it? Is it possible to share that information with council offices so that folks who choose not to go to a family justice center still have access to that kind of support?
So it's a great question. One of our biggest challenges with the partnership is that it's volunteer, and so they have capacity issues. They have worked to expand it, and we can get back to you to confirm this, but my understanding is that in addition to taking referrals through the FJC, they also take referrals from AVP, the Anti-Violence Project, and I believe they've explored whether or not they can take direct referrals from a few other entities, but very transparently, it is a capacity issue because it is a volunteer program. So we're aware that's a challenge, and we're working to try to help them offer it to be on the FJC.
Well, have you thought about making it part of the city's infrastructure and saying, hey, we're relying on these volunteers, but actually this should be part of the portfolio of NGPV?
So, we haven't considered that at this time, and right now it's at Cornell Tech. The way they're doing it, it's focused on their student learning as well. So I think, we're open to more conversations always, but it's not something we've explored at this time.
And just to kind of give a little more background on the partnership, it really arose from research. So these are two amazing professors that do research on this specific issue around digital privacy and online harassment. And so they initially started as a research project through the FJCs, and then they saw that there's such a need, and they grew that to these direct digital privacy safety checkups. So I think that's a great point, and we can definitely follow back up with the council about that.
Yeah, I think it'd be really important to incorporate into the infrastructure, especially with how prevalent it is. And I just also wanted to, you talked, the way that you've been framing or referencing some of the programming that is available, it seems to be geared directly towards people who have some sort of a relationship with the person who is causing the harm. But we know that so much of what people experience is oftentimes anonymous by different groups, by bots, by all these different things. In our research, we found that among those who report being the target of online violence, politics is cited as the top reason, followed by race, ethnicity, and gender. And so when that is the case, again, overwhelmingly, you're finding folks that you don't know are the source of the harassment that you're experiencing. And so what is available to those folks, because it sounds like what you talked about was pretty targeted to when the person is known, and in addition to that, if it's sort of this anonymous kind of hate that a person is receiving, and you all cited sort of the really, really very real mental health, physical health impacts of this, what does not knowing who this person is do in terms of eligibility and access for some of the things that you just talked about, or the relevancy of some of the things that you just talked about?
So I think a couple things. I think, you've identified one of the biggest challenges of doing this work, right, is that the people that are perpetrating this harm are often anonymous. And I think that also goes to why it ends up being increasingly more virulent, like online versus in person, because people can be anonymous. I think in terms of supports, I think first, when we talk about this broadly, and I think so much of our office's role is about awareness and education about issues of gender-based violence, right? So I think when we talk about it, it's really important that we continue to drive home the fact that, like, the root causes of this behavior exist everywhere, and this is just a new space where these behaviors are sort of playing out, right? So it's a form of gender violence, no matter whether it's somebody you know or somebody you don't know. It's just a new space because we're living our lives online increasingly. And in terms of, like, the services would be the same. So if somebody came in, and especially when it comes to dealing with some of the emotional, mental health, kind of impacts of it, it wouldn't matter whether it's somebody you know, whether it's somebody you don't know, right? You could walk in, and if you're looking for counseling, if you're looking for that kind of support, if you want somebody to talk through your options, if you want to look at safety planning, right? Even if you don't know who somebody is online, there might be steps you can take to kind of maintain your own safety online. So I think in terms of that's really open to anybody and everybody who'd want to access those supports. You wanna add?
No, I agree. I mean, our office, would consider that part of our gender-based violence definition. If somebody walked into a family justice center, they should be offered the same supports and services. I think, as Saloni mentioned, where it gets challenging is when it's someone that you don't know, that adds an added complication and challenge when you're advocating for certain civil and criminal legal remedies. So I think that is where the challenge becomes, but the services would still be available.
And I think, I guess also my point or question is, because of the challenges posed by this happening in an online environment where technology is changing very quickly. We can't regulate the internet at the speed to which things are changing. It seems like there is way too much of a reliance or concentration on, we'll do what we can to explore what the civil and criminal legal remedies are, which are primarily reactive, and I think maybe our resources are perhaps better spent, again, building out infrastructure that helps people heal, that helps people protect themselves online, and all of these other sort of preventive measures, the education campaigns. So what are the staff's experience with dealing and comfortability with dealing with people who are facing sort of a more anonymous but serious online harassment?
I think post-COVID, the staff's comfortability has definitely increased, and we've done a lot more to enhance the training, because I think you're exactly right. I think, a few years back, pre-COVID, we weren't living as much online. I mean, we were, but not to the extent that we are now. So I know we have recognized a real need to do more in this space and offer rigorous, regular training on this, so that folks actually can do adequate technology abuse safety planning, beyond just like, let's change your phone number, let's look at a new phone, like really try to dig deeper on that. And that's why we offer the ongoing trainings with Cornell Tech and try to accompany technology facilitated abuse in our DV 101s. We're always looking to enhance and do more. But I think you raise good points. We have to prepare our advocates to be able to have those conversations, to be able to help somebody with that safety planning proactively, right? And not just as a reactive measure.
And what's the scope of the training? I know you mentioned the Cornell 101, or the Cornell Tech Safety, and the DV 101. Or is there any other trainings that you can share with us that are specifically around online gender-based violence?
So we've offered sporadic kind of trainings when we've had a real need from community. Saloni can talk a bit about like the trainings that we've offered with youth through ERAP to kind of do more like training parents on understanding technology so that they know like what apps their teens are using and how to help work with them. So we've offered some trainings in that way as well.
Yeah, and I will say, so the Cornell Tech is like a specific tech abuse training, right? And then in our GBV 101, we talk about how technology can be used as a tool of abuse. In some of our other trainings, especially on sexual violence and stalking, where we see a lot of online kind of overlap, right? Whether it's like online stalking behaviors or online sexualized violence, we go a little bit more in depth into the online piece. And then as sort of Jen mentioned, we have a bunch of trainings for like young people and parents, right? So around things like tech abuse and digital safety with one of our partner orgs. We have using technology such as texting and social networking to bully, harass, stalk, or intimidate that one of our provider org does, and we work very closely with another provider org, Day One, that creates online resources for young people and adults to safety plan around online engagement. So really, we're always pushing that because I think the earlier we can get to sort of prevent learning these behaviors in the first place, the better.
Oops, sorry. I want to ask you a little bit about the research that y'all have available to you. Has there been any research accumulated through the office to show the gendered impact of online harassment? I know you cited a couple of different things, quite broad, in the city, either as standalone research or integrated in wider research on gender-based violence?
There hasn't been any research on online harassment in the city.
Okay. So do you think it would be helpful for the city to conduct this type of research to better quantify how prevalent online harassment is for people who reside in the city and what types of support they would like to see established on the city level?
I think it's one of those things where we could always know more about all of these things, right? In terms of what people's experiences are in the city. Yeah, and I think again, like thinking about other places, like potentially some of the work that the Department of Health already does around like looking specifically at young people and their experiences, maybe thinking about how this plays into that as well could be helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be worthwhile to conduct specific research on this and specifically get feedback from folks who are experiencing it on what it is that they need. Do survivors of online harassment have access to programs like Home Plus? Are they eligible for those kinds of programs?
Yeah, I think any survivors of gender-based violence, we would include online harassment in that, would be eligible.
And would the office support the expansion of Home Plus to include resources specific to survivors of online harassment, including like tech support to help increase online privacy?
I think that's not something we've contemplated at this time, so we can get back to you.
I'm going to hand it over. I have more questions, but for now I'll hand it over to Chair Gutierrez for questions.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to acknowledge Council Members Kagan and Ubreu, who have also joined us. Thank you so much for your testimony, and I appreciate your honesty about not being an expert in tech. I mean, neither am I, but I think the importance is like our experiences in real life interactions, I think, should have a bigger impact on the way that we talk about tech and access. So in many ways, you are the perfect person, right, to speak about this. I have a couple of questions that I want to just put out there. Specifically, you mentioned, obviously, we were all online before the pandemic. The COVID did hit, and now we're relying on technology, obviously, a lot more. Were you all, as an office, aware of any specific increased responses that you needed to have with regards to online harassment? I know there's not data, there's not significant data, but is there anything you can share about how that, if there was a shift during the pandemic?
I mean, it's anecdotal. So, when COVID hit, the FJCs had to become completely remote service centers, which we had never done before, right? All of our services were in person. But post-COVID, or during COVID, we had to shift to an online model. And we did a lot of work with survivors and hearing from them about how hard it was, right, to connect with us and make sure they were connecting with us through a safe phone, right? And they had access to a safe phone. So we developed a partnership with T-Mobile during the pandemic, for example, where we were able to give survivors phones and link them to local T-Mobile stores to be able to get a safe phone. So in that way, we were able to kind of dig in more and provide more services so that they could actually be online safely.
I see.
And we did see an uptick a bit, but again, because of capacity, you can't show that in the data. But as far as Cornell Tech and the services folks need to be able to be safe online, we have seen a continued demand for those services.
And can I ask, and I know this is kind of like an area that we're all expanding on, do you all acknowledge in an intimate partner relationship when one partner is purposely withholding technology devices, a laptop, a phone, purposely, is that considered online harassment? Or like, what is the classification there?
I mean, it would be considered a form of like tech abuse, right? And depending on what that was, you could also see it potentially being a form of economic abuse if somebody needs that computer to do work, right? Or so I think we could put it in a lot of different places, but we would definitely consider that
Okay.
as part of the larger picture of what's happening.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but on the Cornell tech abuse training, thank you so much for educating us on that. Do you know if it's offered in multiple languages?
No, I don't believe it is, but I can confirm that. It's primarily offered for the advocates that work through the FJCs and in the larger domestic violence prevention community. So it's not geared at the moment towards clients because it's voluntary. So I believe it's just offered in English, but we can confirm that.
I see. And so it's offered to English for, essentially for like the staff to be trained on that. And then, yeah, so then I think it's important for the staff to have that in multiple languages. And so that you're not sure of if.
Let me just confirm with them
Okay.
whether or not they offer it in another language.
Okay. And then my next question is related just to data collection. I know it's hard, right? And it also takes a lot of more people coming forward, which does the opposite thing of what they want, right? Could lead to more harassment. I mean, when I get harassed online, I kind of just turn inward. I kind of find that the less I acknowledge it and talk about it, and it's probably not good for my mental health or my staff's mental health, but I really find that I don't know if there's a more fruitful way of responding to it. But how have you all thought in the 2 minutes since we asked the question last time about what are some of the first steps we could possibly take on like collecting data? And then like the subset of that question is, do you know have agencies worked with you all to provide any data for online harassment, specifically DOE, since there's more devices? And so just curious, if that hasn't happened, like, are there other agencies that have shared that information?
I'll let Saloni take the second part of that question, but the first part of the question, we do collect with clients' permission. We collect information when you present at a family justice center, just basic screening and service category information. And one of the service categories that we collect is whether or not you were provided with services related to tech abuse. So we do have that data. So if somebody came in and was sharing with an advocate that they wanted help around technology abuse, we would check a box in our database around that so that we could ensure we were offering all of the appropriate services, like a referral to Cornell Tech, or possibly exploring a family court order of protection, or talking about other remedies. So we do have the data, but again, that's someone coming into an FJC, which not everyone is, wanting to do, or perhaps, disclosing that at the front.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do think, we're definitely open to partnering with our sister city agencies. I think two things. One thing, in the 2 minutes since the question was first asked, I do think one thing that we really do want to say is, like, even without the data, we acknowledge it's a problem, right?
Oh,
So
sure.
I think the data is helpful, but it's not that we're saying there's not a problem because there's no data. We know this is a problem, and we know it's a challenge. And I think thinking about DOE in particular and thinking about, their respect for all curriculum and the Dignity for All Students Act, I think that's something that they are kind of aware of and do explore kind of how a lot of the behavior that plays out in school also plays out online in terms of bullying behavior. And we can definitely follow up.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm just going to ask, but maybe you let me know, because I know from the opening statement, some of the data that you pulled are from other institutions. But do you all have a sense of how many people here in the city are affected by online harassment?
I mean, my guess is it would be probably similar to the other statistics, right?
Okay.
But we really can't say.
Okay.
More than should be.
Okay. And do you all have a sense if online harassment has increased specific to migration status?
We don't have that information, but it's a good question.
Okay. My last question is related to what was in your testimony, page 5. I think we all have the same copy. So thank you for kind of sharing state and city law and kind of like what are some of the resources available for folks. Can you speak to how the law protects folks who are victims of like repeated it's so fast. It happens so fast. And so is there something specific for folks when it is kind of repeated across multiple platforms. And then can you all share in your expertise how long it takes for a judge to make that call of calling for a website to remove content, and how long that takes for it to come down?
So the first question around like the different remedies, so about whether or not there's like an ability to address repeated harassment in those. So our penal law has stalking as the main way you would get at this.
And can you, and I'm so sorry to interrupt you, I should have asked this at the top. Can you just also expand on the differences between, yes, stalking and doxing and cyberbullying, just so that, like, kind of the different forms so that we're all on the
Sure.
same page?
So as far as like the criminal and civil legal remedies go, they're not going to match up with the types of abuse, right, that we're talking about. They're much broader. So in the criminal and civil legal remedy realm, you're going to explore harassment second, which is a very low-level violation offense. Doesn't even warrant an arrest. It's like causing annoyance and alarm. Then you're going to explore the different degrees of stalking. Stalking is repeated behavior, but it doesn't have to be repeated over days or weeks. It can be literally something that happens repeatedly in a day or hours. So you're going to explore those remedies, and you're going to explore something called aggravated harassment, which is threats made online or in person. So it's like a broad, I feel like the criminal remedies are not an exact fit, right, for some of these. And you can explore getting an order of protection through family court for those different types of offenses. And so whether or not a judge is going to do that and when they'll do that is so dependent on the judge.
Does it happen often from folks,
From my anecdotal experience, I have not heard of it happening often, but I know our advocates who are going to testify after us will be able to share more specifics on all of that. If you want to add anything else.
No? And
Yeah, I think, and a lot of it, I mean, again, I think the anonymity component comes into play here as well, right? Which is kind of separate from the non-consensual distribution of intimate images kind of law.
Yeah, I mean, oh, and I should have, I forgot to mention the biggest change in the law, which was that specifically getting at non-consensual intimate images and sharing those, revenge porn, what most of us think of. Our advocates have done an amazing job advocating for those laws, and that to me is like a specific form of online harassment, right? It's not the broader kind of online harassment. And that really is the only like specific type of relief we have right now that gets at the types of behavior we are talking about.
okay, and then can you just explain the definitions as best as possible, or the differences between cyber exploitation and deepfakes?
Sorry, we're
As
looking
a
at each
non-tech
other.
expert that you have
Yes,
already
well,
admitted
as
you
I
were
shared
not.
before, I am not a tech expert,
No,
so,
no.
and I know our advocates are here that are probably
So
going to be
we'll
able
let
to
them
explain this.
Yeah, we can let them comment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the revenge porn laws tried to kind of get in on this because, as I said before, the remedies we had are real broad and really weren't being able to be specifically used in these type of situations. And so the revenge porn law was really about trying to like hone in on some of that. But I'm sure our advocates will be able to speak more to that.
Okay, wonderful. And I think,
Just want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Stevens.
and then I'd like to acknowledge Councilmember Brew has a question. Questions?
Thank you. I have 3 questions. The first is just to walk me through, I am getting harassed. Don't know who to call. So if you call PD, I work a lot with seniors. Seniors are getting killed on the phone and, send money to this event for non-existing something, and they're all spending their money on this. It's horrific. The neighbors go to the cops. The cops don't know what to do. Then I call FTC, I call DA, I call AG. Lost, absolutely lost. So can you walk me through, that's question number 1, what happens? Because I assume most people call PD. Second question is on young people, which you mentioned in middle school. I have a feeling that there's just not enough support for those programs. So I wanted to know what we need for the middle school, if not younger. And then the third is on the family justice centers, just what's their percentage of the online abuse as opposed to maybe just general? Those are my 3 questions.
I'll take the first and third. Okay. So with elders, I know, Councilwoman, that is definitely something we're seeing come into our family justice centers. So if somebody walked into a family justice center or called our family justice centers for support, we would explore what options they wanted to take. Honestly, the first thing we would do is try to connect them to one of the city-contracted elder abuse programs that we partner with.
For the seniors, yeah. I'm not talking-
Exactly.
yeah.
So they're really the experts on working with elders, and so we would try to get them a case manager through those programs. They do home visits because Obviously, it's not always easy for an elder to walk into one of our centers,
they're not
right?
coming.
So we would try to connect them to one of those programs,
Okay.
and then those advocates would explore the different options. And you're right, it is complicated because, NYPD will often say they need to work with the district attorney's office to investigate it. We do at each of our district attorney's office have a DA that specializes
But
in
is this
elder
also for the same for the online?
Exactly.
Same
It's all the
process?
same. Yep. So that would be considered a type of elder
So
abuse.
you call PD as somebody who's being abused. What happens? That's what I don't understand.
So PD would explore what criminal remedy they have to possibly make a police report that would then get forwarded to the district attorney's office.
all right.
And what I was saying before is our criminal remedies are not super specific on this. So it's like trying to fit that behavior into a specific remedy. And sometimes they would work with the district attorney's office, depending on that bureau, to consult the case and see what remedy could
But
possibly
you're also a
exist.
little bit at the mercy of the person at PD being sympathetic, I have to tell you. Okay. The person who's there from Safe Horizon, do they deal with this or they don't do it? They do.
They do. So Safe Horizon has, as you all know, CVAP programs.
I do.
And they have crime victim advocates in each of the precincts.
They're
as
not
well.
there 24/7 though.
Yeah, they have different shifts and different times, but they are charged with reaching out to every crime victim after a report
And this
is
would
made.
cover,
Yes,
their
this would cover
portfolio?
this. Yep.
Okay. Then my other question is young people, schools, et cetera.
No, for sure. And I think, again, I think we can follow up and we can, reach out to DOE. We're not the only program doing this in schools, right? This is sort of our program. It's definitely broader than us.
How many schools do you cover?
We have, in middle schools, we're in 128 middle schools so far.
Okay.
And so, I think that for us is we've trained over 55,000 students, teachers, and staff. So I think those are strong numbers. We can definitely follow up and see what else is out there because we're not the only sort of game in town when it comes to that. And then you had a final question, which was
I think I was just trying to figure out,
the percentage to the FJCs. I think so. It's challenging because I think, as Jen mentioned, like some of our tech abuse stuff, especially the Cornell Tech, is limited by capacity, so it doesn't really match kind of the other numbers at the FJCs. But we can sort of follow up and see what we're seeing.
do the companies help you at all? You mentioned T-Mobile, Verizon. I don't know if Verizon does anything because these companies, they're not participating in any prevention from what I can tell.
So we have, as I've mentioned, have a partnership with T-Mobile.
T-Mobile.
They also now recently have put Assurance Wireless reps at our FJCs once a week to enroll folks who need phones. And we have had a partnership with Norton LifeLock in the past to kind of like be able to offer those to survivors. And then we have the partnership with Cornell Tech.
Okay.
so
I'm trying to
we're
think
exploring
prevention.
it.
In other words, Verizon, everybody else, are they doing something on the preventive end? This is what you should not be doing. I don't get any of that in the mail. Are you working with the companies?
We're not working on. I think that's a great idea to kind of explore other kind of partnerships.
Right. Okay. And then the only other question, back to the data. What are you doing about the data? I know you said it's a challenge, but is there some long-term plan for data?
So we're always looking at the data application that we use at the FJC and seeing what else we should capture that would be helpful, when advocating for future programming. So with this hearing, we did look at the tech abuse numbers, as I said, and I think we had like 506 folks specifically helped with that this year, but we can get back and confirm that with you. So I think we just need to keep looking at that and seeing what else we can explore if folks are willing to share that with us.
But shouldn't PD also be involved in the data issue?
So for our FJC application, it's just the application.
I know,
we're
but
involved.
shouldn't they be pushed to be involved with, you are one agency, like one mayor, all that stuff?
So I think you need to, we can't speak for PD, but for our data collection efforts, we need to look at what we're collecting to see how it could be used to advocate for more programming.
But you could push PD to do that, right?
Well-
Okay, thank you. They never talk to each other.
And I'll pass it over to Councilmember Stevens.
Good morning. I just have a few questions and just thinking about, and I feel like my colleague, Councilmember Brewer alluded to it, is just around what coordinations do you guys have with like NYPD and when these things are coming in, because some of the concerns that I've heard is the lack of sensitivity or kind of brushing some of like the incidents off or blaming victims when they've come in. And I know like Horizon is there and things like that, but I've heard that this is still continuing to happen. So what coordination or trainings that are happening in collaboration?
Sure. So I can speak of the coordination we do through the Family Justice Centers, and then Saloni can speak about it from our broader coordination with NYPD. So at the Family Justice Centers, as I believe most of you know, we have a specifically trained domestic violence police officer on site. If survivors want to make a report to them, they can. They also can follow up with the precinct on existing reports. They report to the Chief of Department's Domestic Violence Unit. And we do a lot of coordination with them for reports made through the centers.
I just needed the headphones.
As well as we have them follow up a lot on reports maybe made through the precincts where they're not sure what's going on in the case. And then we offer training. So for example, we just organized a survivor panel for NYPD to have survivors go out and speak at their annual conference for domestic violence officers. So we had 2 survivors speak to over 900 officers about their experience with PD, both positive and some challenging experiences, and they were really receptive to that through the domestic violence unit. So we've been looking at more and more ways to share survivor feedback with PD, which has been great. Like that has been something new we've been doing. And then our office also has a training and advisory committee, which Saloni can speak about.
Yeah, so it's a council-mandated NYPD training advisory committee that we're working with them on around all issues of domestic and gender-based violence, and so we've been supporting that work and connecting PD to some of our advocates and like organizations that are in the space, as well as having survivors inform this. And we're actually going to be looking, kind of at trainings across the board, because I think part of it is like, no matter what the skill is, how you deal with the person in front of you, right? It doesn't have to be whether it's about trafficking or sexual violence or gender violence or online harassment. The response to the person is important, and I think we're kind of looking at all kinds of all their trainings to see how we can improve and strengthen that.
The next question I have is just, do you know any partnerships that the city might have with like the social media companies regarding sexual harassment and things like that online, and like what that partnership might look like? And if we don't, is there a path for us to start working with like the social media, like the bigger social media platforms?
So actually, earlier this year, the Department of Mental Health, the DOHMH, held its first sort of social media convening, just about the impacts of social media, especially on young people, as a public health issue. And so I think a lot of that convening was thinking about how can the city do more, just recognizing that especially for our young people, their lives are taking place online, and it's not really separate from their day-to-day lives, and we can't really think about it as an add-on. It really is. So we're happy to follow up, I think, and kind of keep you posted on where that goes.
But yeah, I think a convening is nice because it's like us talking, but I'm saying specifically working with the social media platforms. I think especially when we're looking at like a city such as Big Azaz, and a lot of things are driven by social media and different things. I'm thinking about how are we looking at these partnerships and agreement, because it is a partnership, right? Like they are making money, their advertisement and all these things that are happening. How are we working to make sure the standards are up to our liking and things like that? And so is there any type of partnership of conversation with the bigger social media platforms?
Not that we're aware of, right? And but I will say again, at that convening, they did have people from like Facebook and Google talking about things that could happen to kind of improve positive online engagement, right? So there might be more to come.
I would definitely love for us to kind of explore that route a little bit more. But those are the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd actually love to, because you started asking some of the questions that I was hoping to, and to build on that a little bit. And it sounds like there aren't, but I think I would encourage there to be this sort of dialogue with some of the bigger social media apps around employment practices, right? Like we're seeing some of these big companies cull a bunch of workers that are specifically charged with being able to screen posts, take things down, take disciplinary action against accounts that are being abusive. Is there a point of leverage that the city has in negotiating some of those things with these larger apps, to the council member's point, that are obviously making a good amount of money?
I mean, yeah, none that we're aware of at NGBV, but we can follow up.
And then there was something that Chair Gutierrez said that really resonated, and I'm wondering how y'all are thinking about this. But I think specifically when it comes to harassment that is primarily being lodged online, sometimes, especially in the political sense, it's very coordinated, right? We've seen around the country there has been a really stark increase in political violence against women of color, particularly. And that doesn't just include, they were tracking the numbers against women of color elected officials, but that does not include just those folks. We have, advocacy organizations and organizers and leaders in movement, civil rights movement spaces that are the subject of this harm. And the point of the attack is to be like a deluge where it's a waterfall. You can't see anything beyond the attack. I know, and I'm speaking from personal experience. You can't see anything beyond the attacks. You're just like drowning in it, and so you feel completely separated from your community. Like, I know that in my community, I have a ton of support, but when there are these cycles of really, really vicious, violent attacks, you literally can't see any of it. You can't breathe. Like, you're just drowning in it. And you feel very alone to the point where you don't think that there's anything to access. And so the gap that I'm hearing here also is that, like, even somebody with the kind of access I wouldn't have never thought to go to a gender-based violence organization or to an area in our governmental infrastructure to get some support. And so I think what is needed is really, on the most basic level, like a PSA campaign to tell people that this is a thing, help people get less isolated around it, and encourage them to seek different spaces where they can get support. And so my question is if that's something that you all could commit to starting to think about and build out. Because quite frankly, I think your numbers would be a lot different if people even in the moment made the connection that they could go somewhere, because you feel utterly helpless. You feel like there is nothing and nowhere to go.
No, I think this is something, again, I think that we and our partner orgs have done a lot of work on in the past few years, is really how do we integrate this conversation into our larger picture, and we talk about gender-based violence and domestic violence, right? Because when I hear you speaking, the first thing I go to is isolation has always been a tactic of abuse, right? And that's the same thing, just in a different space. And so I think, we are really grateful to all of our partners to kind of to continue to sort of increase the awareness of this form of abuse in part of our larger outreach efforts in our work.
Sorry, thank you. I want to ask you a little bit about gender expansive folks, citing that they're experiencing online harassment due to their gender. Are there specific programs aimed at assisting specifically gender expansive folks?
So we partner with community-based organizations that would say that they specialize in working with gender-expansive survivors, primarily AVP through the FJCs. But as far as specific programming, the programming I mentioned before that we offer is offered to all survivors of domestic and gender-based violence.
Thank you. For and I'm going to go back a little bit. I'm sorry that I'm jumping around, but going back to some of the online the programming and the training. Are y'all accounting for and putting out different programming for those, and these are just quick, yes or no's, but online harassment that is targeting youth facing gender-based violence, and then, other programming for focusing on specifically sexual harassment in an online environment, or specific program focused on stalking as an online experience. Do you have those kinds of specific, hyper-specific programming available?
In terms of the training, yes, right? We kind of look at different segments of the population, different experiences to see how they're different.
And then with the services, it really depends on, as we mentioned before, if you're saying you're a victim of stalking, or this has happened, where it's been revenge porn and sexual violence, then we're going to explore those remedies that we have available to address those types of specific violence.
And in terms of outreach programs historically, and I'm talking about like large-scale sort of public service and like that kind of outreach, have there in the past been public campaigns that provide information, risks, and ways to seek redress specifically around online forums?
Not that NGBV has led.
And is again, that's something that y'all would consider?
I mean, yeah, I definitely think we can have further conversations about that.
And then I guess just to wrap it up before passing it over to our colleagues again, I think it's clear that there are gaps and we're learning a lot. When you think about those gaps, what are the limitations that the office faces addressing gender-based online harassment, and what types of resources would be needed to ensure that your office moving forward could adequately address online harassment?
I mean, I think we've addressed some of the limitations and challenges. I think, the anonymity is a huge one, right? It's like, in kind of like when we're addressing who are we talking about and where. I think a lot of the other issues kind of in terms of even getting, engagement, I think you all mentioned from the major players on the tech side, right? Even getting people to take things off websites and all of that, all of those will continue to be challenges for us. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the FJC side, it's continuing to be rigorous about the training we're providing so that maybe someday I can sit in front of you and be a tech expert, right? Like, I think we need to keep looking at our trainings and our partnerships. I think we need to keep looking at the data we're collecting, making sure that when we're doing outreach, we're talking about technology-facilitated abuse so that someone would know. And I'm so sorry for what you and your colleagues have experienced. Like, I wouldn't want someone to not know they could come into a center or call us for that kind of support. So I think what we can commit to is looking at what we're doing and seeing if we can kind of address some of those awareness, kind of like raise more awareness about this, right, in this specific type of abuse.
Yeah, and being able to have multiple places to go because, and we've brought this up in other hearings where we've been together, but there are lots of reasons why somebody wouldn't want to walk into a precinct or a family justice center because it's co-located in a precinct, and so there certainly seems a gap in kind of the options of infrastructure available, and I think that the chair had another question.
I just have one more question. Thank you all. I think piggybacking off of what Chair Caban said, which is like, how do people even know that this exists, that this support exists? And I think based on the data that we do have, unfortunately, gender expansive folks, women of color, are constantly dealing with multiple forms of harassment, and so it really becomes, now I'm preaching to the choir here, but you become very conditioned to kind of going about your day in this really dangerous way. But do you all know if there is a specific way that someone calling in 311 needs to report this as a form of tech abuse? Like, is it something that they need to say specifically, or how is 311 working with the agency to better support folks that need to know that you exist?
We can definitely follow up on that.
We work with 311, and we've trained them before. If there are certain keywords mentioned, they refer them to the hotline, to the Family Justice Centers, to our online portal, NYC Hope. So as far as those buzzwords around technology-facilitated abuse, we can follow up with them because we work with them regularly on those types of referrals.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
And I believe Councilmember Holden had questions.
Thank you, Chairs. Just to follow up on the PSA, because I think that's a very good idea. I've suggested that in a number of areas. But my biggest hurdle, when I get somebody, a constituent calls me and says, I'm being harassed in various forms. It's always on the local level and the precinct level that I have the biggest hurdles to try to convince them to get involved. Then I have to call the DA. So it's good knowing that I can go to you and call your office, and certainly, how do I get around this? Well, when does the person who's harassing cross the line into criminal? Is it when they threaten violence, or they just keep harassing? Now, more often than not, from the precinct level, I got, well, they didn't threaten to hurt the person. They didn't threaten violence, so we can't get involved. Is that really true?
So what we could do, and I can make sure, Councilmember, you have my information, we can explore with the officers we have on site whether or not it meets the statutory definitions. So repeated violence, threatening violence is part of the aggravated harassment definition, but stalking is repeated behavior causing annoyance and alarm. I mean, I'm not quoting it correctly, right, but it's those kind of elements. And so we could look to see if the behavior the constituent is reporting would actually fit into other types of civil or criminal statutes. And then if the harassment is actually from an intimate partner or a family member, they could actually go into family court, which doesn't require making a police report or an arrest, to try to get an order of protection that way.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to share my information.
Yeah, but that's good to know that I have your office to go to both offices. But on the, I just want to follow up on the 311 harassments, because that's happening a lot to my seniors especially. And as a senior, I've been, even before I got into council, I felt there's a lot of harassment for seniors online, especially because they're not that savvy, obviously, and some don't even have a computer or don't even have a smartphone, but they're still being harassed by people calling them, wanting to buy their homes, scams. There's not a day that goes by that I don't get a complaint from a senior saying, what do I do? What do I do in this case? So we can really refer seniors to your agency?
Yeah, you can refer them to us, and we'll partner with our city-contracted elder abuse programs, because I think what you're speaking to, right, is like the loneliness and social isolation, right? And so many seniors, they're happy to be talking to somebody online, not recognizing that that could be abusive behavior, and then they're giving up personal information. So we can definitely work with our elder abuse partners to see specifically what kind of programming they're offering that could address some of this. So I'll share my card with you afterwards, and we can work on
All
this.
right, just one other, I think I have a few minutes. Yeah. One other question about training on a precinct level, because we were told that the NCOs were trained in this kind of situation. Then we're finding it's not true. And the second part of it, even we have 2 detectives in my precinct, my main precinct, that are domestic violence officers or detectives. Are they trained even to know about the online or domestic harassment online or technology?
So I can't speak to the specific training, right, that NYPD is offering, but I know that we work with the domestic violence officers. That's who's on site at our FJCs, a specific FJC officer, and they do meet with survivors at our centers that are reporting online harassment.
But what about, because there's a lot of officers in the NCO program. Are they trained?
Again, we can't speak to NYPD's trainings.
Is it offered to them? Does your office say, we need to come in and train the NCOs? Because that's what they're supposed, they told me when this program first started, that they were told, they know how to solve these situations where neighbor is harassing neighbor, somebody's being harassed online. They were trained. And I just want to know if that was really true.
Yeah, NYPD has its own internal training academy that does this training.
They don't answer to you. They don't even consult with you.
Well, as part of our training advisory work, I think that this is what we're trying to do, is really get a sense of, where we can plug into some of their trainings to make them more robust.
And then who we work with closely are the domestic violence officers through the DV unit, and my understanding is the NCOs, right, are not part of that unit. So that's why we're saying we can't speak to the type of training they have, but we know that they all get training.
Well, we'll try to get to the bottom. Thank you so much for that.
I think I'm going to take a little bit of advantage as the chair to editorialize just a little bit. But speaking from my experience as a public defender practicing in court, the criminal legal system in the penal code was not made to cover these things. It is one thing to charge somebody. It is exponential, and listen, as somebody who has maybe a different view of the utility of a criminal legal system to begin with, but in the practicality of how it works in court, almost impossible to prove these cases in court because of being able to prove certain elements beyond a reasonable doubt. The origin, right, especially if it's specifically online, being able to tie it back to a specific person. People being savvy enough to know that if they say something like, "I will kill you" versus "I hope you get killed," being the difference in being able to fulfill an element of the penal law. And so, I caution against throwing so much weight, time, energy, and resources into that avenue when I think perhaps resources could be better spent on supporting survivors, on people knowing how to be able to protect themselves, on changing culture and healing prior trauma so that people who are harming do not harm. I think it's a much better use of our time, energy, and resources to be proactive in that manner, because these cases are almost impossible to prove in court, especially when you're talking about just like your run-of-the-mill county district attorney's office with millions of cases. And I will tell you right now, nobody is putting a ton of resources into these cases, and a lot of time, if there's a lot of tech involved, they're like, how do we get rid of this case real quick, because we don't want to put time into it. It's the same for like forged documents and anything that is like deep web, tech, those kinds of things. We get rid of those cases real quick because nobody wants to work them up.
So I totally hear you, and that are the challenges we encounter every single day at the Family Justice Centers. My only kind of point to say back, Councilwoman, is that we struggle, though, because so many survivors come into our centers and they want us to explore all those options. And we are transparent with them that it's challenging, right, for all the reasons you mentioned. But from practicing a client-centered way of services, we do need to explore them, right? And so that's why I mention them as something we explore, because survivors are asking us for those. But I completely hear you that, you know, there also needs to be a focus on prevention and training and healing.
Yeah, and I don't think we're suggesting that,
No.
that we want
Yeah.
more.
No, and I'm not
No,
saying that.
it's
And
both.
yeah, and I'm not saying that you are. And I think part of
Yeah.
the issue is too is that when survivors go into a space, there's just, you're aware of a small universe of what's available to you. Survivors are so used to thinking that that is the only avenue that's available to them. I mean, overwhelmingly, and I think this has come up in prior hearings, but in surveys of survivors, and we all have sort of because we have been socialized in this way, a desire for punishment, for discipline that is very, very real. But there are enough research and studies to show that overwhelmingly survivors report wanting several other things well above that, and that's to heal from their harm, to never be hurt in the same way again, and for nobody else to be hurt the same way they are. And that requires the use of different tools and strategies to be able to create that kind of environment.
And I think that's very much like NGBV's overall approach, right? Is that there's
Totally.
no one-size-fits-all for survivors, and we try to have as many options as we can for as many survivors as we serve.
So many survivors come in and don't want any of those remedies, and then we try to connect them to mental health counseling and other social service supports. We're not here to push anything on anybody. We're here to offer good, accurate information about the resources and help people with safety planning and get connected to the resources that are there, both criminal, civil, legal, and non-criminal, civil, legal.
Thank you. And I just want to say I appreciate and would love to be able to stay in conversation about building out more of those resources in some of those other areas. And thank you for taking the time to testify. I think that's it, yeah? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, chairs, and thank you very much, members of the administration. We will now hear testimony from the public. I'd like to remind everyone that I will call up individuals in panels, and all testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. I would like to note that written testimony, which will be reviewed in full by committee staff, may be submitted to the record up to 72 hours after the close of this hearing by emailing it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. For our first panel, I'd like to call up Annie Safula and Ann Glatz.
These are my. Be nice, tell them, these are my friends.
You may begin when ready.
Is anybody from NGBV staying? Oh, all right.
The door shut.
I just want to acknowledge that there's no members of the administration left in the room.
Good morning. My name is Ann Glatz. I'm a civil attorney with Sanctuary for Families, New York State's largest nonprofit organization dedicated exclusively to serving victims of gender-based violence. We are so grateful for the opportunity to testify today on this critical subject. With the ever-increasing pervasiveness of social media and other online platforms, mobile phones, and smart devices, Sanctuary's staff have seen the lives of survivors of intimate partner violence destroyed when abusers engage in relentless technology-facilitated abuse. Abusers are increasingly using digital technologies to abuse, exploit, harass, and threaten their victims. This type of abuse includes hacking, spyware, stalking, spoofing, identity theft, impersonation, sexual extortion, and cybersexual abuse. CSA is the dissemination or threat of dissemination of nude or sexually explicit images or video without the victim's consent. The images may be authentic images of the victim, but they may also include startlingly realistic Photoshop or deep fake images. CSA is reaching epidemic proportions, and its victims are overwhelmingly women and girls. CSA also disproportionately impacts lesbian, gay, bisexual individuals who are roughly 4 times more likely to be victims of CSA than heterosexual individuals. Technology-facilitated abuse is highly psychologically injurious to its victims, who experience heightened levels of PTSD and suicidal ideations. In one study, over half of victims contemplated suicide as a result of CSA. It is also a serious threat to their safety offline. Studies have found that over 30% of CSA victims were harassed or stalked outside of the internet by users who saw the material online. It's critical that judicial and law enforcement systems are given the tools and resources to effectively respond to cybersexual abuse, to protect survivors, and to empower them to move into lives of safety and security. As such, Sanctuary urges the City Council to join in several proposals to support survivors of CSA. First, it is vital to implement mandatory trainings on tech abuse for professionals who interact with abuse survivors, including law enforcement, Supreme, criminal, and family court judges and staff, and DA's offices. Second, we urge the Council to earmark funding to support tech-facilitated abuse victims. Other than Sanctuary, unfortunately, there are virtually no victim services agencies providing comprehensive, ongoing services to these victims. Victims need both specialized legal assistance and tech safety planning to minimize the dangers of stalking and harassment through mobile phones and other smart devices. Third, we urge City Council to modify the existing New York City Code 10-180. May I have another minute? Thank you. Disclosure of an intimate image to accord with the state unlawful dissemination statute by removing the problematic element of, quote, covered recipient, which requires that the defendant have received the intimate image directly from the victim or created the image themselves. This element has proven to be extremely difficult to prosecute. Finally, we urge the Council to support legislative changes to strengthen statutory language on cybersexual abuse to align with recent New York State legislation, which now includes, quote, images created by digitization or deepfake images. We're profoundly grateful for Chair Tiffany Caban for her extraordinary leadership in support of survivors of domestic violence and related forms of gender-based violence, and her advocacy on this and many other critical issues. We also thank Chair Gutierrez and the Committee on Technology for recognizing that the miracles of 21st century technology are unfortunately accompanied by a host of dangerous new threats. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Good morning, Chairs Caban and Gutierrez, and members of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this important topic. There's no way I could fit all of the things I have to say in 3 minutes, but I will do my best and I will provide written testimony. My name is Annie Seifele. I'm a civil attorney in private practice, and I'm here in the capacity as my volunteer job as the co-chair of the New York Cyber Abuse Task Force. The New York Cyber Abuse Task Force includes representatives from Sanctuary for Families and many other legal services, as well as private attorneys as myself. Collectively, we represent hundreds of individuals across New York City, as well as other areas of New York State. Many of the people we represent are women, people of color, members of the LGBTQ community, because they, as we have said, and as many of the materials you're here today, are disproportionately impacted by technology-facilitated abuse in all of its forms. The Cyber Abuse Task Force has 3 main areas of focus. One is to advocate for comprehensive laws and policies, such as expanding civil liberties, expanding civil remedies, which can there's so many loopholes in the current ability for someone to get an order protection through family court, and would like to talk more about how to expand those, and also looking at regulatory and licensing structures that are under the purview of the City Council, which could be used to pressure and leverage change in the tech companies, which is sorely needed. We also support judges and attorneys and service providers. For example, the task force was responsible for the first ever two-part tech abuse training for judges that is part of the Judicial Institute of Training that judges can watch and use as part of their CLE requirements. So those are all accomplishments of the task force, which is a volunteer collective of people who are really in the weeds and working with survivors of this type of abuse. In the short moment that I have today, I do want to direct my comments about changes that can be made at the New York City Department of Education. Again, the task force has represented hundreds of students who have faced severe cyber harassment, largely girls, and as we've mentioned, who have come under the attack, formerly known as revenge porn. We prefer to replace that term now with image-based sex abuse. We understand that it's the term people are used to using, so oftentimes we offer a bridge by saying image-based sex abuse, formerly known as revenge porn. But imagine the devastation of having your nude and sexually explicit photos and videos leaked to your classmates. Members of the task force, myself included, have represented countless girls who have been impacted by this type of abuse, usually enacted by a boy who they once dated. I can tell you as an attorney, as a former DOE principal, and a survivor of image-based sex abuse myself, if I could have one more minute, that all levels of the city's school system fall short when dealing with this form of gender-based violence. Officials are not equipped to properly investigate, respond to, or preserve evidence when dealing with image-based sex abuse. We see three patterns on the task force. One, victims are blamed when they become a victim of this horrific type of abuse. Two, when the depicted victim is under the age of 18, the material actually constitutes child sex abuse material, also known as child pornography, making it a federal crime for any adult, even a well-intentioned educator, to view, possess, or share it during an investigation at the school-based level. As you can imagine, school-based staff who do not know how to handle this material might completely inadvertently illegally view or possess material that's a federal crime. And three, when victims are not supported by the adults in school and do not feel safe from further harassment, the only alternative offered for them is for the victim, the girl who's at the center of this abuse, to transfer out to a new school. Some of you may be familiar with current legislation against Brooklyn Tech. I would encourage you to review that case. It's an illustration of the wider pattern. What we're asking for is for the City Council to work with the Chancellor to implement policies immediately that train school-based staff on how to properly handle and respond to these egregious abuses that are being experienced, again, most disproportionately by girls, female identifying students, LGBTQ students. Second, the DOE needs to expand its Title IX office. In 2020, under immense pressure, the DOE added 7 Title IX coordinators, which at the time was a huge feat, but if you do the math, that's 1 Title IX quarter for every 80,000 female students. It's just simply not enough. And finally, like in the case of Jane Doe in Brooklyn Tech at the moment, the DOE must create more options for school-based leaders to properly handle the aftermath of a substantiated instance of gender-based violence and image-based sex abuse. Right now, the only option being offered victims is for them to transfer out of the school where they were harassed and abused. I thank you for your time and note that the Cyber Abuse Task Force and its members remain available for further discussion and conversation on the recommendations that comes out of today's hearing. All of the contact information will be made available in the written materials, but you can find us on cyberabuse.nyc. And I encourage the members to make use of our collective knowledge and advocacy power to make change here. Thank you.
I know several folks have questions. I have just one to start. What city regulations do you think could be implemented to rein in or strengthen protections on different online platforms?
It's a fantastic question, and I have myself actually, and members of the task force have dug into some of the licensing structures that, for example, business licensing structures, and we we hope that we can find some measure by which, there's like states, for example, who are starting to regulate, state legislatures that are starting to pass laws that regulate tech platforms. California, for example, has led on some of the privacy initiatives. And when they do that, it creates a cascade of other, the regulations sort of become the new standard. And so I think members of our task force would love to talk more about places in the city admin code, licensing and regulatory structures that could be used, similar in ways that this is different, but I've heard civil litigators talk about using the restaurant and licensing structure to talk about Seamless and Grubhub and those kind of totally different tech abuses that are happening to deliveristas. Thinking about the ways that those kind of structures could be used to impact tech platforms to be more cooperative, because the New York State law says that a judge can order a social media platform to take down material, and in our experience as practitioners, it's oftentimes not happening. The orders are just being ignored. And so, there's lots to explore there.
Do you have a question? No, Councilmember Brewer?
Thank you both. Thank you both very much. I do want to follow up on the schools, because we heard from the city 120 middle schools, something to that effect. I have a feeling that's not very often that they're dealing with what they said was 50,000 students. So I'm wondering, because it is so pervasive in the schools now, and I'm just wondering whether it's just training, are there legislative changes that should be taking place? I have the horrible feeling that you're adding AI to this, and I have a feeling it's going to get worse. So I guess I'm just looking for some guidance on the schools. Is it just training, or are there other things that we could be doing? Because the AI isn't even something that people understand. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot to explore there. Obviously, educators are dealing with a lot, and it's hard to continue to put more things on the plates of schools and school leaders. But there was a change to the chancellor's regulation after COVID, which did put into the disciplinary code that cyber abuse and cyberbullying that even was happening technically outside of school hours is now under the purview of the school leader. Now there can be discipline or mediations or conversations that are happening, even if it's the tech that's happening outside of the classroom. And so I think in that there is at least at the very base level an acknowledgement that school leaders should be addressing it when it's happening. And I think right now there's just a big gap between what's happening, in the schools, what's happening in our kids' lived experiences, what teachers and school leaders are dealing with every day in school, and what is actually needed to address the gap between the gap of safety that's happening with the introducing tech to schools. And I don't think it's a simple solution. I think it requires, a really, expert and people who understand what's actually going on in schools to create training and to create understanding around it as well. Because you can change the regulations, you can change the law, but it doesn't necessarily change people's minds around it either, right? And so I think there's so much to be done, but I think it's an important, there's no elegant solution, but I think there's a lot to be done.
Thank you. Thank you for testifying today.
We will now move to remote testimony. If you are testifying remotely, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and you may begin once the Sergeant at Arms sets the clock and cues you. For our first set of Zoom panelists, I would call Dhanaraj Thakur.
Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Time starts.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to provide some comments to this briefing today, and thank you to the Council for their work on this issue. So my name is Dhanaraj Thakur. I am the Research Director at the Center for Democracy and Technology, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. Our work focuses primarily on advocating for greater human rights in digital spaces, and that includes the issue around online harassment and abuse. As more women have sought political representation by running for elected office, we have seen demonstrated increases in online harassment and abuse, including targeted mis- and disinformation campaigns against these women. While women in general may be subject to significant mis- and disinformation and abuse online, an intersectional approach, which recognizes that women of color have to contend with multiple sources of oppression at the same time, and that impact is particularly unique, can better eliminate the additional challenges faced by women of color in general. With this framework in mind, we sought last year, we completed a research project that tried to look at two particular important research questions. One, are women of color political candidates more likely to be subject to online harassment and abuse and disinformation compared to other types of candidates? And what are the impacts of mis- and disinformation and online abuse of women of color political candidates? We did this by conducting a content analysis of 100,000 posts on Twitter and talking to women of color candidates from 14 different campaigns that ran for Congress in November 2020. And we found a few things. I'll just highlight a few here and then talk about recommendations that we made. One, women of color candidates were twice as likely as other candidates to be targeted with or be the subject of mis- and disinformation. Although women of color candidates were not the most likely target of online abuse in general, and I can explain what that means later on, they are most likely to be the target of particular forms of online abuse, including sexist abuse as compared to white women, racist abuse as compared to men of color, and violent abuse 4 times more than white candidates. Women of color candidates were also the most likely to be targeted with and be the subject of posts that combined mis- and disinformation and abuse. When we spoke to the various campaigns, the women of color that ran for Congress and their staffers, they highlighted a couple of things. They believe the purpose of the attacks was to get them to internalize abuse directed towards them, to accept the oppression they face as women of color, and to drop out of politics. They also noted that in many cases, the fact that the candidates identified as women were often intensified by referring to the candidates' other identities and attributes such as their race, their immigrant status, their age, marital, and parental status. And while many of the interviewees that we spoke to described the attacks as being severe, together with their campaigns, they established a broader community of support and employed several resilience and coping strategies, and remained in fact represent politics today. In the report, we focused specifically on the social media platforms as being where the onus of addressing this problem lies. And so we list out several recommendations targeted at them. But what I want to, and then we can get into that later on in my testimony and subsequent comments, but what I want to really highlight here is that it's important for the social media platforms to recognize that not all political candidates, as in not everyone in general, can be treated the same. Society does not treat us all the same, but many of the mechanisms that the platforms have in place treat all the candidates and on people in general in the same way, and this is insufficient. And based on our the evidence around disproportionate impacts for women of color in particular, we would argue that those mechanisms need to change. Thank you, and I can stop there.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Really informative. I'm wondering if you have any information on what resources the city or any city or locality or state should provide to those who experience this kind of online harassment based on what you've learned.
With regard to the political candidates that run in these elections, and I should add that this was looking at federal national level elections, but we suspect, especially talking to the various women of color candidates, that the problem is more severe at the local level, and some of the council members already described this as well. One issue is around reporting mechanisms. Another is around how these platforms are designed, and the last one is more about transparency. So in terms of reporting, the platforms have often reporting systems available for different for when these instances occur, but they often fall short in many different ways. They fall short in particular because they don't often recognize the unique kinds of situations or kinds of abuse or language as targeted at specifically in the work that we looked at, women of color. So this is one area to be improved. A second issue is around the mechanisms that are used internally to propagate content online. And by that, I mean the use of AI and other tools, human plus AI reviewers, which often fall short. What we argue is that there could be ways, particularly on the design side, to introduce more friction and slow things down in a way that could help address some of the problems, particularly on the survivor side. And the last thing is transparency. The council members in the previous discussion raised questions around data and research. The real roadblock here are the social media platforms. They are not transparent in providing the kinds of data that would be helpful. For example, how many reports are submitted by political candidates or by people, users in general, for example, in the city or even in other locations, around online harassment and abuse and misinformation. We just don't have that. I think there are ways that the council and working together, for example, the state government could put greater pressure on the platforms to address those gaps.
Thank you so much.
Our next panelist will be Taj Sutton. You may begin once you are unmuted and the sergeant cues you.
Thank you. Hello? Can everyone hear me?
Time starts.
We could hear you.
Thank you. Hi. So my camera's off because I am actually currently the target of my second vicious doxing, harassment, and violence campaign as an unpaid parent volunteer who is part of something called the Community Education Council in New York City. Those are essentially the school boards. And this is the second time in 4 years this has happened. But this time is very interesting. We talked a lot today about, and I'm so grateful to the chairs and to the panelists thus far for speaking about the intersections of this and how politics and race and ethnicity and gender play a part. But a power dynamic that we aren't speaking about is that of even our elected officials and someone like myself who is a parent with no staff, no financing, no headquarters or anything like that. So in addition to the right-wing parents who are currently utilizing the New York Post, and so part of me is excited to have something in common with Tiffany Caban, but I'm on my third New York Post hit piece in just the last month. And in addition to the parents, the right-wing Moms for Liberty affiliated place members that are coming after my council for having the audacity to call for a ceasefire because we love all children, there are also elected officials, including some members of this body, who have disparaged me and attacked my First Amendment rights and opened me up to harassment, doxing, and assault, including death threats via social media without so much as having a conversation with me. Assemblymember Stacey Pfeffer Amato and Councilmember Eric Dinowitz are two of these individuals. And so I think something that we have to look at as well is what does it look like and what is the response when an elected official utilizes their platform in league with some of the very individuals in politics that we are seeing slowly but surely creep their way into New York City and harm our schools, harm our families, harm our children, and create the conditions for the kind of violence that we are seeing online. It is a very specific group of folks who behave this way. There is a very targeted intention on the side of individuals who are fighting for justice and liberation, not to move like that, not to engage in smear campaigns and violence, even when there is so much evidence about how awful folks are, about how racist, how classist, how elitist, how ableist, how transphobic people are. But again, I'm in the New York Post 3 times. None of it is true, and it has been uplifted and amplified by individuals who are elected officials. So in addition to talking about gender, about race, about class, disability, sexuality, and all of these incredibly important intersections, we're getting to a place now where we have to, sorry guys, and I'll finish up. We're getting to a place
please
now
finish your statement, that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I just think there is a right-wing movement building in our city, folks. And part of that repertoire and part of their arsenal is the very violence we are speaking of. And so to not make that a part of the conversation, to not look to our left and our right, and to not connect that violence that we're seeing targeted at elected officials to the unpaid parents that help our schools run as much as we can, despite the defunding and the criminalization of our kids and communities, including by some of the members of this very council. We're having a dishonest conversation if we're not adding that to it as well. And there is no recourse for me as a queer Black woman, parent volunteer in this system. This has been going on for years. I have told every chancellor, I have told every DOE cabinet, every iteration that I've engaged with, and I get nothing, absolutely nothing. The only reason I was able to secure a meeting with the DOE that has already been pushed back once is because I had to go to the PEP in person, despite the threats on my life, and see the chancellor in person and beg him to meet with me. So that is what parents are dealing with within this arena of targeted online violence. And that's why I wanted to show up today and bring that intersection to the forefront for everyone. Thank you for your time.
I just want to say thank you for sharing your experiences, and I am I'm really sorry that this is what you are going through, but I am grateful for your leadership and your courage in sharing those experiences. And also, yeah, the New York Post is a rag of a publication. So again, I'm really sorry that you have been targeted in that way. And those power dynamics exist on all different levels, and you're right. I think we should be talking about sort of the difference in power and how that's being leveraged between folks, including myself, who are part of the political class, and citizens who are in their communities trying to do what's right. And I thank you for doing and saying the hard things at a moment when the consequences of doing that are very, very real. And so thank you for that. And if I would encourage you also to reach out to myself and my office if you'd like to speak and discuss more. We're always here to be of support. I'll tell you, or even just to be able to have a place to vent about your experiences with the New York Post. I will tell you, I have some colleagues who have literally never spoken a word to me, to my face, but are always ready and willing to give a quote about me to the New York Post or Fox News. I feel I'm happy to be in good company, and I just want to thank you again for your bravery, and please don't hesitate to reach out to our office.
Thank you. Our next panelist will be Gabriela Mejia. Gabriela, you may begin once you are unmuted and the sergeant cues you.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Time starts.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Gabriela Mejia. I'm the Movement Building and Communications Manager at Right to Be, formerly known as Hollaback. Part of my work in my organization includes regularly working with leading organizations, doing the work to end harassment, and reaching out to elected officials here in New York, where I'm a native of, to discuss upticks in hate. Emily May, who's our president and co-founder, sends her regrets for not being able to attend, but I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide our testimony. So Right to Be is a people-powered movement to working to end harassment and to build a world that is free of that harassment and filled with humanity. We started as a blog in 2005 that collected stories of street harassment in New York City, but our work has expanded since then globally to empower people to respond to, intervene in, and heal from harassment. We have trained over 2.6 million people around the world in how to intervene when they see harassment happening. We continue to collect stories of harassment on our platform, Right to Be storytelling platform, where people can share their experiences and get support from a community of vetted bystanders. In 2020, we partnered with the International Women's Foundation, IWMF, to expand the platform to support women and gender-expansive journalists experiencing online threats. According to a report from them, 70% of women journalists have experienced more than one type of harassment, threat, or attack in the past. Many reporters are forced to practice self-censorship, retreat from the public sphere, or even quit their jobs. Online harassment has emotional and psychological effects, including depression, stress, and anxiety. It's really difficult to deal with the burden of responding to harassment alone, which is why we believe equipping others to become allies is important. In a program evaluation conducted on our platform, one participant shared, quote, "I was getting exhausted from this harassment. My harassers were like insects. They followed me like bees. This community helped me alleviate that," unquote. We've also partnered with PEN America to create bystander intervention, how to be an ally when you witness online abuse training. And that uses our 5Ds methodology, which are distract, delegate, document, delay, and direct. Bystander intervention is a proven way to stop harassment that can also chip away at the culture of harassment and reinforce that hate shouldn't be tolerated. Our recommendations are the following. The council should support a study across middle and high schools in New York City on the prevalence of online harassment and the strategies in place that students would like to see to address it. The study should be followed up by a series of focus groups with students. We recommend digital safety training in middle and high school.
You can
in
wrap
New
up.
York
Go ahead.
City and I'll wrap up. That teaches students about the risks of online harassment, the importance of privacy, and walks them through necessary steps to protect themselves and their families online. We recommend bystander intervention training in all middle schools and high schools in New York City, and that includes how to intervene in situations of in-person and online harassment. Councilmember Crystal Hudson put forward a bill last year, but it really never made it on the floor. We believe this bill should be brought forward again. And to the extent possible, the council should require social media companies to be transparent in content moderation, reporting, complaint mechanisms, anti-harassment, and anti-hate policies. Greater control is needed against harmful practices that prioritize violent and hostile content designed to generate more engagement. Nonprofits should also be involved in the creation and updating of all these policies. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. What's the bill carried by Councilmember Hudson?
I don't have that answer for you. I think resolution 0554 in 2023.
Thank you.
The March.
Thanks so much.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. The next panelist will be Paulette Healy. Paulette Healy, you may begin once you are.
Reimbursement, and it has to be, you know, when you are giving someone reimbursement, it has to.
Oh. Paulette Healy, you may begin once you are unmuted and the sergeant cues you.
So it's like, you know, you're going to get a collection of checks from the bank, and you're going to use them to pay off all of your vendors. And when
we will come back to Paulette Healy. The next panelist will be Subha Vijay-Sirivardhana. Subha, you may begin once you are unmuted and the sergeant cues you.
Time starts.
Good morning. Thank you to the committee chairs and their staff. My name is Subha Vijay-Sirivardhana. I'm a Sri Lankan feminist researcher and activist. I live in Hell's Kitchen. I have worked for about a decade towards gender justice and human rights at varying levels, from the national to the international. I gather evidence from across diverse global contexts, work closely with movement actors, provide contextual and policy analysis, and advocate with the United Nations member states, UN special representatives, working groups, and agencies. For over 5 years, I have worked at the intersection of technology, sexuality, and gender, and I'd like to focus my testimony today on gender disinformation. You may already be familiar with the semantic distinctions between the terms misinformation and disinformation. Typically, it is understood that the former is unintentional and the latter carries an intent to harm. Misinformation can be easily debunked and delegitimized through source verification, fact-checking, human experience, and so on. In contrast, disinformation cannot be easily fact-checked or identified. It must be understood as an act of manipulation where the authority and the authorship of the information is not under suspicion. Disinformation cycles are often state or otherwise powerful machinery and contribute to systemic manipulation of information and information systems. Disinformation campaigns rely on the exploitation of existing narratives that stem from historical discrimination. The UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression points out in her new report that it is a strategy used to silence women and gender diverse people. For example, deepfake pornography targets women in the public eye. In a 2019 study, it was observed that deepfake porn targets women 100% of the time, from the US to India. In New Zealand, researchers observed earlier this year that following the Let Women Speak anti-trans event, anti-trans disinformation exploded across social media circles, quickly becoming genocidal in intent. That's their words. This same speaking tour visited us here in New York City, leaving in its wake a wave of anti-trans disinformation and hate. As you will well know, we are currently seeing a marked increase of disinformation targeting women and gender diverse activists who are calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Meta and other corporations are silencing information about the genocide while continuing to be passive when it comes to disinformation. Tech corporations and their political allies avoid accountability and shield the privately owned black box technologies from independent review. This perpetuates the notion that we don't understand the tech. We urgently need greater transparency and to expose the human actors behind disinformation. Technology corporations continue to gain credibility by promoting numerous policies and measures they employ to combat misinformation, but deny their role in knowingly creating and continuing to deploy algorithms which we know, for example, increase body image issues for girls and young women and drive more people to join extremist groups. I'll wrap up. State actors ignore the evidence and tend towards punitive laws and policies, exacerbating the criminalization of sexual and gender diverse persons, young persons, and others, and curtailing freedom of expression. I urge you to hold accountable these corporations and powerful state and other actors who benefit from these campaigns. We need to demand that technologies are developed, maintained, and governed through greater public ownership and participation. I urge you also to consider a rights-based approach with protections for freedom of expression, including sexual expression, and protections for the necessary strategies employed by women, gender diverse activists, and rights defenders, such as anonymity. The powerful actors derive power from this idea that they are the experts and we are not. The decisions they make on a daily basis affect every single one of us and billions more people outside this hearing. We are the experts and we need to continue saying that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will call Paulette Healy again. Paulette, once you're unmuted and the sergeant, you may speak when the sergeant cues you.
Yeah, and that
time starts.
Yeah, no, listening to some of the justification, they were just like, well, we got operation costs. I was like, you don't have $50,000 in operation costs.
He's paying attention. No, that will be the end of the online testimony. I just want to note that we had online registrations from an Irene Siegel and Francois Olivas. I do not see them on the Zoom. If there's anyone present in the room or on the Zoom that hasn't had the opportunity to testify, please raise your hand now. Seeing no one else, I would like to note that written testimony, which will be reviewed in full by committee staff, may be submitted to the record up to 72 hours after the close of this hearing by emailing it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Chair, we have concluded public testimony for this hearing.
Oh, sorry, he was already on. Thank you. I just want to thank everybody who testified, to all of the staff that contributed to this hearing. I know I learned quite a bit. It's really clear that, one, this is a prevalent issue, it's an important topic, and that there are lots of gaps to be filled to support folks who are experiencing this. I think, the nature of online harassment allows for just a really large deluge of harm and trauma, and there's a lot of work to be done to minimize that harm and also provide spaces and opportunities for folks to heal from it. So we'll be following up with folks on their different suggestions and ideas, following up with the administration on ways that we can work together to strengthen the supports that are available for online harassment that is being faced by women, girls, and gender expansive folks. And I want to thank my chair and give her an opportunity to close.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for both committee councils and for all the folks that came to testify. Looking forward to continue to work to strengthen policies, make them reflective of what's going on and real life experiences of those that are being impacted. And I just want to uplift Taj Sutton, who testified. I missed your testimony, but thank you so much for speaking truth to power and elevating not just the harassment that you're dealing with, but protecting all people. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes our hearing.